The worthy immigrant is by definition itself, it's just basically you satisfy the requirement of being an immigrant, right? So that could be for us as refugees, we satisfy that requirement. We're worthy to be an immigrant.
Episode 11, The Worthy Immigrant.
Hi, welcome back to Rooted and Becoming, brought to you by Gold Trico. I'm your host, Lei Lei Sengchanthalangsy. This month's theme is The Worthy Immigrant, a conversation about success, sacrifice, belonging, and what it means to redefine achievement on our own terms. As immigrants and children of immigrants, many of us are taught that success comes from hard work, sacrifice, and perseverance. We carry the hopes of our parents and grandparents. We strive to honor their sacrifices through our achievements. And yet somewhere along the way, many of us begin to ask a deeper question. What if success is more than what we accomplish? Today's guest is someone very special to me. Kasey Kunstmanas and I met as college roommates at the University of California, San Diego, where she studied computer science. Long before careers, marriages, and life responsibilities, we were simply two young women trying to find our place in the world while carrying the hopes and expectations that so many children of immigrants know so well. What I've always admired about Kasey is not just what she's accomplished, but how she has lived. She is the first in her family to attend college, helping open doors for the generations that followed. She built a successful 31-year career, devoted herself to her family, preserved and supported our Lao community through years of community service, cared for sick family members, and somehow, still found time to pursue passions that brought her joy, including dragon boat racing, where she and her teammates earned gold medals on a world stage. Yet if you know Kasey, you'll know she would never lead with any of those accomplishments. What stands out most is her humility, her generosity, her loyalty, her quiet strength. She is someone who consistently shows up for the people she loves and the community she serves. Today, as she prepares for retirement after more than 3 decades of professional success, Kasey is entering a new chapter, one focused less on achievement and more on presence, less on proving and more on living. A chapter centered on family, friendship, health, travel, paddling, cultural connection, and the freedom to define success for herself. In this conversation, we'll explore the immigrant journey, the expectations we inherit, the sacrifices we make, the pressures we carry, and ultimately what it means to build a life that feels successful, not just on paper, but in our hearts. Whether you're an immigrant or the child of immigrants, or someone who has spent your life striving to prove your worth, I hope you'll see a piece of yourself in Kasey's story, because worthiness is not something we earn through achievement. It is something we remember and were born with. Please join me in welcoming my dear friend, fellow Lao daughter, world champion paddler, and one of the most grounded people I know, Kasey Kunstmanas. Welcome, welcome.
Hi, Lei. Oh, that's great. Thank you. That was a great introduction. I feel like I'm done. We don't need this interview. All done.
No, not at all. We're just scratching the surface.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for having me here. It's great. Great.
Thank you. We are so excited. I'm so excited. We've known each other for over
30 years. Well, no, more than, let's see. So I was going to say it's going to be 31 years from work. And so then we've known each other for probably closer to 35 years.
A long time. It's a long time. We know each other's secrets, the good, bad, and ugly.
Yes. Oh,
for sure.
All those college years.
That's right. And maybe we could share some memories if we get a chance to. We've shared many seasons of life together, and like I said, not a lot of people get to know you because you live with humility, and it's something that I admire, and with strength, and it's definitely I admire you so much, and so I'm hoping that in today's episode that we get to share that with others, because I'm sure everybody is wanting to know who is Kasey Kunstmanas, and I want to be able to share how remarkable you are.
Oh, thank you, Lily. Thank you.
Yes, of course. So before we dive into the topic of the worthy immigrant, I wanted to ask you, what excites you most about 2026? And it could be personal, professional, spiritual, whatever.
Well, just like your intro stated with where I'm at now in 2026, we're almost halfway through 2026, is I'm hoping to retire. Why, I just turned 55, and my goal has always been what you stated, right? I've lived my life. I've kind of gone through that, where we're at coming to America, being an immigrant, challenges that we've had, successes, etc. And I'm happy to say where I'm at now in 2026 is that I'm hoping to move on the second stage of my life. Actually, it'll be more like maybe the fourth stage, right? The longer wellness. So it's all about 2026 for me. Once I do retire, that's the goal. If it doesn't happen, that's okay, but that's the goal, is by the end of the year, do that and really focus on being present with my loved ones, and then self-care, right? So travel, paddling, really just focusing on me. When I say that, not just the actual physically me, but also things, people that surrounds me, mainly my mom, being a caregiver for my mom, and really be present more for my husband, who's unfortunately the past 3 years, I haven't been home as much, being a caregiver for my mom. But now, hopefully, with a little bit more time, I can focus on my energy, having that precious time with him, right? So more of not just being just here, but doing meaningful activities with my husband. So summarize, 2026 is all about being present with people I love, and then taking care of myself. That's all about self-care is where I'm at.
Oh my gosh, I love it. I love it. I look forward to that in my life as well. So I'll be living vicariously and taking notes. Now, because we were roommates, what would you say college Kasey is most surprised about if you compare college Kasey to today's Kasey? Just to throw that out there.
Yeah. I've thought about that a lot now with where I'm at, actually also with questions, right, that you kind of sent, just for something for me to think about. And yeah, I'm giving myself excuses being a younger college kid then, but I have to say I was extremely selfish, back and then. And I think it's a different stage of life, right? When I say selfish, it's more of maybe not being aware that you're impacting people around you. Back then, where we were at, we were trying to figure out our lives. So starting, right? And at that time, it was more like Kasey, right? It was never, and looking back, I know obviously we could always done things better as far as actions that we've taken, responsibilities that I should have maybe taken care of better or take a different route. But that is just part of life. As those who've known me, is I don't regret anything I've done. It just sets up the foundation of who I am now. So I've done things that I haven't been proud of. But that being said, I've done spectacular things that I would not have done now that I did then, right? The partying all night that we did, and when I said party, we weren't really a group of people who drink. We don't go out to get drunk. We go and dance, and we just dance, right? We were starving college students. Remember, Lily? We would go out Thursday night and just dance. And then I don't think I've ever made an 8 a.m. class on time, if I ever make it at all, So where I don't want to say we party hard, we party responsibly. We had a lot of fun. And because of that, again, discovering that with classes, finding out that freedom, because probably similar to you and other immigrant families, we were raised by really strict parents who want the best for us, right? So having that freedom, you do whatever you want. I can sleep however late I want, eat whatever I want, go to class if I want, right? A lot of things that I should be more accountable for. But that being said, thinking back, I'm glad I did all those things. And, yeah, again, I regretted certain things. I'm sure I hurt people. And I remember one story where my mom had a gallbladder infection, so she had to be taken to the hospital. And I remember and I think I was just dating somebody then, first boyfriend in college, all of that stuff. and I choose to go out and not go see my mom. And that was the one thing that I regret. So little things like that, right? And I would have never thought of it until 20, 25 years ago. My mom actually said, "Oh, I remember when one of my daughters did come and check on me." And she remembered that moment, and I did not remember that. I just remember that my mom had to go in the hospital. So looking back now, there's some really irresponsible things I've done, but then aligned with that, there are some great things that I've done that set up where I am now. Does that make sense? So it's a combination of that stage in life, right? Which is fine.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that. So talking about your immigrant story, to give our listeners some context, we go back to your beginning? Tell us about your family and how your family story began from your journey from Laos to the US.
Yeah, again, it's very similar, right, to all of us Lao refugees who kind of fled the similar time, but my family story is very similar to others. But for us, I left when I was 6 years old, so 1975. And it was my dad, he got a warning that, hey, they're going to come after you. They're going to your house now. So he knew that he had less than 15 minutes to leave because they're going to come and put him in what they call a re-education camp, right? Yeah. So, the communists at the end of the Vietnam War, communists came over, and basically what they did was they took all of the old army people, right, military folks, and put them in a re-education camp. And to this day, my dad would never really tell me what he did, but I can kind of suspect, right? So he had a warning and he had to decide I should leave now, but he decided to say, I'm going to take my whole family with me. Now, remember, the whole family means there were 10 of us, 10 kids. My oldest brother, Elaine, he was in the military school. So when he was 17, a year prior, my dad sent him to Thailand because he knew that they were going to come after, convert the military boys to become the communists, to basically be the new army of Laos. So he was the first to be sent over. And then my mom was 8 months pregnant with my youngest sister. So there's all these kids, right, from a 2-year-old to however old my second oldest brother was. So he decided, my dad, I'm taking my whole family with me. So he rushed home, told my mom, you have less than 10 minutes. We're leaving now. Piled all of us in a truck, drove to a cousin's house, picked up 2 more cousins, and then we drove to the border, the Mekong River, right? So basically by then, all of this done, he already, within, maybe less than half an hour, he's already negotiated a truck, a coyote to smuggle us over to Thailand. So obviously, as a 6-year-old, the great thing with being young at that age is just as long as you're with your family, you think you're safe. So all of this didn't faze me at all. It was just like an adventure, right? You're going on an adventure. That night, there are a lot of details, but basically that night we walked through the rice field to get to the river because we're going to basically cross the river into Thailand. So according to the Geneva Convention, if once you cross over to Thailand, the Thai government have to accept you as a refugee. So that was an agreement, right? So any refugee from Cambodia, Laos, and Vietnam, once you land in either Thailand, the Philippines, you have to accept them as refugees. And then you're put on hold until you get sponsorships, et cetera, et cetera. So that was the goal. And my dad knew that. So we basically waited till maybe, I don't know, midnight or whatever until things calmed down. Lots of things happened. My youngest brother, who's 2, being a 2-year-old toddler, he would say things. So they would just cover his mouth because basically you would be shot dead, trying to beat Laos. Yeah. So none of us can swim. We had 3 canoes. So that was my first time being in a canoe, not knowing how to swim. We basically 2 canoes went. We went first. I mean, there's a lot of stories that I remember, but we don't need to go into details. But the whole idea is 2 canoes went. And the third one of my brother was in it with a bunch of our stuff, didn't know where it landed because there was current that pushed it down. So my dad freaked out. After we landed, he counted everybody except for the brother, Ping. So they found the other canoe, drifted down the current. So we were able to then bring it in. So all this time, I found out later from my mom that they basically, the coyotes who was smuggling us, before we got on the canoe, even though my dad already prepaid, to say I think there was 12 or 14 of us. Some cousins came over too. We already prepaid, negotiated everything. But of course, it's now once you're there, they have total control. So every jewelry they see, they'll say, I want that, or otherwise, right? So my mom hid her wedding ring underneath her tongue because she knew that was one thing she wanted to keep, because otherwise they were asking for any jewelry that they see. So she had her wedding ring underneath her tongue, and that was what she was able to keep that. So little stories like that comes out later, right? As you hear, because again, as being a kid, I just remember drifting, and I remember it was really heavy, and I'm sure the canoe flip, we would all be dead because none of us could swim. And I remember playing with the water, like on the side. But again, being such a kid with that childish thought that you think it's not that big of a deal, right? But now that we're adults, like, oh man. So yeah, so we landed in Thailand. We were put in a holding cell to determine, to be processed. Horrible things happen in the holding cell. There's young girls, and you get the idea, right? So if you don't have the money connection, you could be in the holding cell for a couple of weeks before they decide to put you, depending on how much you can pay up. So there's, unfortunately, corruption is everywhere around that time. So it's really who you know. And my dad knew some people over in Thailand. So we're only in the holding cell for maybe 3 to 4 hours. And then we were able to stay with his friend. And then we were assigned a refugee camp in Nong Khai, where in the camp, that's a whole different story. So if any of my friends or palling friends want to ask more about that, that's a different time, different story. We were in a refugee camp for 3 years, waiting. So we did go through the process, right? So we waited for our turn. For 3 years, we have to make sure there's sponsorships, just like any other refugee camps or refugee family. You have to show proof that you have either organization or family can sponsor you, take care of you, so that you can be successful wherever you land, Australia, Canada, the US. So we were sponsored by my aunt in Virginia, but we waited 3 years living in camp. And that was from the age of 6 to 9. I was in a Thailand camp. And that's where I learned, to speak Thai and all of that. Yeah. So that's great memories there too. Horrible things that happen also. But again, being 6 to 9, everything was fine because you're with your family. And we were never, there's limited food, right? But at least we had food, sort of thing. And then we had the Thai government who would come and teach us, Thai. And we had the Red Cross checking on our health. So life was in a way good, and we were lucky where we're at. And so then by 1980, we got sponsored we finally got the paperwork in, came and landed in Virginia in the dead heat of winter. And I remember because it was really cold, but us being, young and thinking of America as a land of, we think it was heaven, right? So we all envisioned this place where there's unlimited food, it's perfect weather, and it's just utopia, right? That was the image. But I remember coming here, landing, it's like, man, it's cold here. So we had our first winter was in Virginia. And yeah, so we got there in 1980. Lots of memories there too. First time I ever had a piece of chewing gum. I remember it was cinnamon flavor because on the way to my aunt's house from the airport, she stopped by the grocery store, and I remember my mom and I went into the store with her, and looking around, I thought, wow, you can get whatever you want, thinking that you'd have to pay because it's all the food there. Just put it in your basket and you're good to go. So that was my image of America, right? Is unlimited food like that. And the cinnamon flavored gum was my first taste of America.
Oh my goodness. I remember growing up with like that cinnamon. Was it Big Red?
It was a red package. I don't remember the brand. I just remember it was a red package. Was it Big Cinnamon maybe? Yeah.
I remember growing up with this brand called Big Red or something. I'll have to look it up and see if they're still around. Yeah, I mean, it's as a kid, right? When you go grocery shopping, like the last part you blur out is the paying part. It's just like you just think like, oh yeah, you just walk out with all this food. So it's very common, misconception with all kids, I think, for sure. Oh gosh. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. What sacrifices would you say that you appreciate more now as an adult that your parents made? And also with that, like the values that you were taught. What values shaped your childhood?
Yeah, definitely. I'm thankful for my parents, especially my dad. I always say I'm fortunate to have the strict and yet the my mom's not going to like it, but the smart side comes from my dad, the sharpness, right? And then my mom balanced him out. She's just so carefree, more relaxed, more fun. I'm glad that I would like to think that I inherited both, right? But the sacrifices are definitely made now that I look back is definitely from my parents, mainly from my dad, that he sacrificed, even from the beginning, right? That I mentioned that he had a choice to just go and just be successful by himself and maybe bring the family later. But the sacrifice that he made by bringing us and then really giving up is his life, really, to make sure that the kids do well and thrive. So the most is what I see with my mom and my dad, right? And then I'm only saying my dad because growing up, he was the dominant rule factor in my life where he dictates like what we should do or not should do. And I look it back now and I see that it's not that he was strict on us, but he was just making choices, sacrifice to determine, what, okay, we were on welfare because nobody, my brothers aren't big enough to have a job. And there's, at that time, there were 9 kids to support. There's no way my dad can work. He doesn't speak English, right? So sacrifices that he made, because he always talked back about, if we're in Laos now, we would be so rich because he was just starting a logging company. He just paid off all the logging trucks. So he was starting to now just recoup all the money. And that could really skyrocket us to be do pretty well in Laos. So with that, and now here we are in the US where he's basically starting over from scratch. He and my mom, right? So they have to decide, do we save an extra $200 a month or we buy the kids a second pair of shoes, right? The sacrifices that they've done as a kid, you don't see that. You're like, oh, I want another pair of shoes. Why do I have only one pair? And then every weekend I have to wash it, right? Because remember, as a young kid, I really had just one pair of tennis shoes. And now thinking back, I appreciate that more because every weekend, Saturday, the 6 youngest kids, we would take out, I remember we'd go in the backyard, take out shoes because my mom would make us, right? Go wash your shoes. And then she'll stand there and make sure we have scrub out shoes in the shoes, dry in the sun. It's like one of the things as a kid, like, oh, why do I have to do this? Why can't you just buy us a new pair of shoes and want to go play with my friends, right? So those are some of the decisions that the parents had to make, right? So there's a lot of other samples, but it's basically the sacrifice my parents had to do for the better goodness for us. But again, we don't see it. Well, I didn't see it then, but I see it now and I appreciate it more. And that's how it grounds me a lot more now at my age. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. I have similar experiences for sure. And I think a lot of us who refugees can relate to that. What did success mean, like growing up in your household? Did your parents paint that picture of what those expectations of success?
Oh yeah, definitely. It was straight A's, right? That success is you have to do well in school. So that was the number one thing is you do well in school. And again, it's a mindset I think of every immigrant and refugee is coming to US. The number one way to path to success is do well in school, right?
Yeah.
So that was always the thing. And every report card, my dad would ask to see our report card. And in the beginning, it was for every A you get $1, So he would start giving us money for our report card. $1 for an A, a B was 50 cents, and that's it. So you strive to get that A, It was never comparing myself with my siblings. That's the other great thing is I appreciate that it was never a competition with my other siblings. It was always like, you do it yourself because that's what you're going to get. It's not like the first most achievable child get this amount of money or treat, right? It's always like, if you do this is what you guys get. If you all get straight A, you all get rewarded, So, and that's another thing I really appreciate my dad is he always fostered that to excel, you focus on yourself first and then everybody else will lift you up. For sure, education. And then the second one, there's probably other things, but I remember the do well in school. And the second one is do not shame our family name. Right. So especially in the Lao community is make sure you don't do anything because at that time there was to fit in a lot of I wouldn't say a lot of kids, but a good number of kids would become gang. It's a way for them to be able to defend themselves because there's a lot of bullying, right? So they join gangs. And so my dad was always, don't shame the family last name. We all have unique last name, right? Sengchanthalangsy, you're related to this group. Phimmasone, you're related to like almost a clan. So those were probably the top 2 things that defines a success is just make sure you do well in school and then make sure our name is only mentioned in a good way, not in a bad way. So that's how my parents define success for us in the beginning. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. All relatable. For sure. You mentioned your dad as being one of your role models. Can you share like what he's taught you around like resilience and also of what he's taught you, like what have you carried forward in yourself?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that question because he is, I mean, there's a lot of people who makes that foundation for myself, but my dad is the one who really pulls me up to where I'm at now. Is not to say, again, growing up, right, as a teenager, college student, I'm like, oh my gosh, why can't I have a different dad? Oh my gosh, why is he so strict? Blah, blah, blah. But again, where I'm at now, it's looking back, it's because of him is who I am. It's the one thing that, in addition to all the pushes that he's done for us, taking care of the family, is how he manages his finances. I have to say, because after you get the education, the next success criteria is how successful are you, and that depends on how much money you make, right? So that's something I've noticed with my dad is we were probably one, like within, after we landed in Virginia, we went to Kansas for a year, and then we moved to San Diego in 1982. 1 year in Virginia, 1 year in Kansas. So we basically migrated west. Again, different story on why we did that. But when we landed in San Diego in 1982, remember, we were on welfare. We were paying for like a house with a 3 bedroom, 1 bath with 12 of us, right? Sharing that 1 bath. And I think we paid $325 a month. But that being said, within 2 years, well, I'm sorry, within 4 years, so 1986, my dad had set enough money. He saved up money just being on welfare, doing minimum wage job to put a down deposit on the house. And I remember people who would sponsor us like, why would you want to buy a house? The government is helping you subsidize the rent. So my dad's like, well, it's not my house. And so I want something where I can have the kids. It's going to be ours. So he was one of the first few in 1986 who were able to save enough money, to put down a deposit into a house that he still lives in now, right? So he's just really good about the materialistic side. I got from my dad, we have a lack of, I should say, right? You could always say, might say that we're a little bit frugal, but I'd like to say it's like we're saving up for the future, right? So you decide what's needed, what's not. So learning that, I think what my dad has not directly taught me, but I observe of what he did and decision that he's made, that pretty much gave me on how I can save that aside, right? And so that's why I think I'm fortunate enough to have the opportunity to really retire right now, just learning from him and deciding, what's needed or not. So I would say that was probably the biggest thing that I appreciate with my dad.
Wow, I love that. I mean, he was an entrepreneur in Laos and continued to have that investment mindset, knowing that real estate is where he wants to go to grow. It's a really good thing. That's a great example that you can save and achieve that American dream in a short time. That's amazing.
I do want to add something on. Again, thank you for having me in this podcast, Lily, because I see this also an opportunity for recording that will live, for a long time. And then this will give me an opportunity to kind of also share additional stuff, right? I know we're here to talk about We're the Immigrant and then of, why we came, how we succeed, defining success, all of that. But for my dad's legacy, anyway, I want to add a little bit more, right? So knowing where he's at now and what he's done for us, he could be extremely successful, right, wherever he does, because he chooses a certain path. But that being said, hearing stories, not from him, maybe some from him too, but mainly from people that he had influence, affected, right, is that he does this with the logging company where he at now in the US, is that he did it with really not with honor, but influencing other people. He would tell me stories about when he was starting his logging company. He was always self-taught, but he always tried to pull other people up with him. Because of that, so he was telling me a story of that back in Laos when he just got a car because he apparently gave somebody he didn't know on the side of the road a ride to somewhere and they remembered him, right? So, or family was in need of some food and he was selling baby piglets. So he gave the little piglets to this family and they remember him, And so all these family who was impacted my dad, even now would say, oh, I remember your dad and he took care of my family. Just things that you don't think you influence a lot of people, but they remember, right? I remember when I bought my parents a ticket when I finally had a job, good paying job that I can buy them tickets to go visit other family members. A family who in Australia, of all places, somehow found out my parents were going to be in Sydney. And they's like, you have to come visit us. And it turns out to be a doctor, and he remembered my dad because he got lost somewhere, and my dad found him and was able to take him to places. I don't remember the whole story, but that doctor somehow remembered my dad of what he did back in Laos. So it's great to hear these stories about my dad where people were impacted by little decisions that he made, right? And so
Yes.
that's the other thing that I take is that every tiny decision that you make will impact that person, and they will remember that, that you
Yes.
might think it's minor, but
Yeah.
it's not. So I hear stories now as my dad, he's going to turn 95, and he still drives, by the way, right, at 95. So he's going to be 95 in 2 weeks. So we're going to do a big celebration for him. But people around the world now with Facebook,
Yeah.
they're like, oh, grandpa's still around. And they'll come when they're in San Diego, they'll come and they'll share stories of what their parents shared with their kids or what my dad did to impact the family. So I think it's great, right? Just hearing all these great, fabulous stories that my dad doesn't remember, but they remember. So that's
Uh-huh.
so anyway. I just kind of want to toot my dad's horn a little bit
Oh
because
my
it's
goodness, yes,
yeah,
please. I love that.
yeah.
And can you tell me and I should know Mr. Phimmasone's first name. Can you give us your dad's whole name so that we can just recognize him?
Yeah, so his first name is Un, last name is Phimmasone, and he lost both of his parents before he turned 12. Yeah, my dad has a great story. He said that when he grew up, he didn't have a last name because back in Laos, you just live day to day, basically. He said that somebody told him, you got to have a last name. He's like, yo, I'm the son of this person. And everybody knows because it's a village in Laos, right? And that's how you identify it. Even now, sometimes I don't know my aunt's name because I always say, it's like, Lily's mom, right? You just kind of go with the title. You don't address the elders with their first name. My dad, Un Phimmasone, he just goes by Un or somebody's son or something, right? But he was told he needed to find a last name. He didn't know what that meant. So Phimmasone is actually the name of one of the monks because he would go to the temple who kind of helped influence my dad somehow. And he's like, I'm going to use your name as our last name. So our last name, Phimmasone, is named after a monk. Yeah.
Oh, I love that story.
Yeah.
And I just falling in love with your father. Like this is such a beautiful, for him to come out of grief, losing both parents at 12, and to hear that how he gave back and made impact to anybody that he can help. He has such a pure and kind heart. All the good things, all the good deeds, right? When you see the impact, he's not even aware of it, but when you see it, the domino effect and the positive impact it's had on so many people. That's so beautiful. Just makes me really love him more. So,
Yeah. I mean,
yeah,
granted, right? Growing up again, I mean, I'm sharing the good stories with him. He's
yeah,
also your typical strict dad. So
yes.
in high school, he won't let us do things. And, I'm sure you and your sisters, your siblings encounter the same thing, right? So going to high school, you can't wear shorts to school. I'm like, Dad, why
Yeah.
can't I wear shorts? You can't go trick or treating. You can't go to the movies. You can't do this. You can't do that, right? You can't even play sport after school. So I learned to do a lot of white lies to my dad mainly. My mom, she's pretty good, but she kind of agrees with my dad more. And so it's always like I can't get my mom on my side because it doesn't matter. It's my dad, but yeah, it was always how do I get away with things and then using education as a shield to everything. So I learned pretty
Uh-huh.
fast when I hit ninth grade and I wanted to play sports. I want to play tennis, soccer, badminton, right? Those are my three sports I played in high school. But my dad's like, nope, nope, you can't. You got to focus on education, 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 right?
Yeah.
And you can't wear this to school. I'm like, okay. So I found ways, right? I found ways to do things that I want without hurting, without letting my dad know, right? I mean, it's nothing bad or anything, but in his eyes, no, right? So I want to wear shorts. Okay, fine. You won't let me, Dad. I'll put on a long skirt. Once he drops me off, the skirt comes off, put in my locker, and I'm wearing shorts, right? So I learned to adapt. And I remember, like I said, I was the first one in my family to go to university.
Yeah.
And I remember when I did that, I told my dad, because he would always ask us to see a report. I said, Dad, at this level, they don't do report cards anymore,
Oh,
right?
You told him that.
So, so I basically my three younger siblings who went to San Diego State and Ty went to UCSD also, is they never had to show my dad report cards again because
Yeah.
there's no report cards when you're at that level, right? You're just so things like that. Or probably the biggest one is the second year I move on campus, right? So that, and then the third year we became roommates, all of that.
Yes.
And once I graduated, I have to move back, right? That was my dad. You got to move back home. So I moved back, and let me tell you, for 2 months, it was my dad and I were like this. It was not working out. 2 months. And I knew that I need to move out for the sake of our relationship, right? So I said, Dad, I'm going to go back to school and get my master's degree.
You like, did you get a master's degree or did
I
no?
moved out because I'm going back to school. So that was the only way honoring. So I said, I have to move back. So I moved back to the UTC area because I'm getting my master at UCSD.
So after a couple of years, did he ever ask you about your degree?
I think the first, because he said, how long is the master? I said 4 years, right? And then, but after like the first, I think he kind of figured out after the first 2 years, because I was working too, right? I was working too. After 2 years, I said, oh, Dad, I'm going to take longer because I have to go only at night school because I got to work, you know? So, but after a while, I think he kind of stopped asking because, but that was how I was able to move out was I had to play that game, right? So that I don't shame the family name. You can say, oh yeah, my daughter's not living at home because she's actually getting her master's degree.
That's right. And it does take longer when you're doing night classes and you're still going home and seeing them. So nothing that hasn't changed. And
Exactly. Yeah. And I did the same thing and I tell my younger three siblings, I set that pave or that path for you guys. Now they can just move out of the house because it's education related. My dad finally figured out for high school sports that I was playing sports eventually, right? But then I had to like, Dad, I need to do that because if I want to get into a good school, I got to play sports. So it's constantly, this theme was focused on this, right? And I have to, educate him. If he doesn't get it, I have to basically lie to him,
In honesty, I mean, playing a sport does help with just demonstrating focus and being part of a team or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Sure. That is hilarious. Thank you so much for sharing that. So you studied computer science, right? I don't think I ever asked you this question. I just, assume you're just super smart and love math and all that. But what drew you to computer science? Has it always been an interest?
When I got accepted to UCSD, there was probably about maybe 8 of us from the same school, right? Crawford High School. And we're still friends, most of them, Lily. And when we got to UCSD, you have to declare your major. And, they all went. Dawn did her psychology, I think. She did I forgot what, she's a teacher now. But so everybody choose different things. And I'm like, I'm pretty good in math, right? You're typical Asian. I don't know what I want to do. And then I'll just try it out. So I didn't really know, didn't even think about computer science. Just like, let's see what comes out of math. And, there was, Revell was more of like your deep thinkers, and I'm like, I'm not, English is my second language. I'm not going to go for that. So I went with Warren College, which is more engineering focused. I go, oh, okay, I'm good at math. I'll go with that. And like, I don't know which one I'm going to do. And actually, computer science was not my first major. And I remember trying to figure out walking into the class, there's some prereqs, right? But walking into the class who helped me decide what major was, I walked into an electrical engineering intro class. And I walked in there and like, oh, it's a good ratio because there's like maybe 60 students and there were 3 women, right? I'm like, I'm going to stick with this major because there's a chance I'm going to get a boyfriend fast, right? So that was electrical engineering. I forgot the name of the class. It was like an intro class. I'm going to stick with this, and because there's a lot of percentage that I'm going to get a pretty boyfriend fast, So it sounds horrible, but that pretty much, so my first major was going to be electrical engineering just because of that male to female ratio in this class, right? And then I took that class and it was hard. I'm like, and it was boring as hell, I have to tell you. Who cares with the equation? It was just boring. And then, but I stuck with it. So I think the first year I stuck with electrical engineering. And then the second year, I'm like, I don't want to do this because by then you're exposed to campus, you kind of know more. I'm like, but I don't want to waste a full 3/4 of classes I've taken. What can I use to take that? And then computer science, I can use it as my basis. So I'm like, computer science sounds more fun. At least I can, program and play games, whatever. And that's how I became a computer science major.
Oh my goodness, that is, I still remember like when you and I remember when they had computer labs. Not a lot of people had their own computers. You have to go and use the computer labs to actually for work assignments, and stuff like that. And then when like the World Wide Web came and open source, and you're like, Lily, it's going to change the world. I don't know, that there's good and bad. And like everything you talked about happened, by the way. Everything you talked about.
Yeah.
So if I were to ask you, if you think back about your dreams then, what came true and what changed?
Yeah. What came true was I was able to travel the world a lot,
Oh,
right? So that actually came true. What's changed is where I'm at now is that the understanding of, I always go back to the foundation is I have a better, now that we're a little bit older, the pillars that makes up, because I always thought of everybody should have as many pillars as possible, at least 3, right? So when I talk about life pillars, and I had this concept even in my 40s, really, every time you turn a certain decade, there's certain aha moments. So when I turned 40, I go, I need to make sure I teach not just myself, make sure I myself have multiple pillars. Because if any one of the pillar falls down, I have other pillars to keep supporting me, right? So I try to pass it down to my nieces, mainly my nieces, being, I hate to say it, even now with women, we have a little bit more challenges, right? But I always said, make sure you have as many pillars you can, because I've seen where if you have sometimes 1 or 2 pillar, and it's usually your spouse or your work. If one of the pillars fall, there's a good chance of you falling. But if you have multiple pillars, if there's 1 or 2 that falls, you have others to stand on, right? So I always kind of thought of that as a pillars thing, right? But sorry, so back to your original question, was the thing that came true for me was I knew after graduating from college that I want to see the world more. I want to travel, right? I think that is the case with all of the college age, that area. You just want to explore and see the world. And so 1995 was when I graduated, and I was extremely fortunate at that time with the job market. We didn't have to go looking for jobs, especially in the computer science field. We had companies who came looking for us on campus. So all of the tech company, local tech, were there. And I remember I had 4 interviews, and I got 3 job offers. And then one SAIC said, you need to come on campus and have an on-site interview. I said, yeah, I'm not going to do that because I already have those 3 job offers, right? So it was nice, right? I was very, very fortunate that I had a degree with UCSD and companies wanted us, right? So we pick and choose the company. We were so, so fortunate. And I remember one tech company based in the Surrender Valley really wanted me. They were a computer science related, they design web pages. And the reason they said they wanted me because I had a personal website of myself, when I was learning how to build a website. And because of that, and that said, we want you to join our company. And they made me a great offer. And then Peregrine System up in Carlsbad made me the lowest offer. But they said, you get to travel. And guess which one I went with, right? So I turned down the high paying job. I'm like, I don't want to program for, So I've been very, very fortunate with my life. Everything that happens but it's also my decision, right? I wanted to travel. I wasn't chasing after the money. So I went with the traveling opportunity, the lowest salary offered to me, but I had something I wanted to do. And that's the one company that I stayed with until now. I mean, yeah, granted, for the companies, HPE, Micro Focus, whatever bought that company. But to me, it's always been the same company, right? And with that, I was able to travel all over the world with that. It made me appreciate San Diego so, so much more. We are so fortunate to live in San Diego, but I was so fortunate to discover that because I had an opportunity to check out other places. So that was the biggest thing that came true for me, is having to be able to have that opportunity.
I
Yeah.
love that. And we'll have to do another segment on places you've been, because I'm sure you have been all over. What of the dream changed? Was there something that didn't come true?
I would say there's really nothing, Lily. It sounds, I've lived a life where I really am fortunate, right? So I would say there's really nothing. Yeah, besides, a really nice house next to the ocean, all of that stuff, but that's just, materialistic thoughts and things, right?
Gotcha.
But there's really nothing that I would say at that time, because at that time my focus was having fun, making a good amount of money,
Yeah,
traveling, and I did all of that.
you did.
So
That's great.
yeah, so to me, there's really nothing really
Yes.
that I didn't have.
That's amazing. Not a lot of people can say that. So really kudos to you for being able to say that your dreams that you had in your college days, you fulfilled them.
Yeah,
Pretty
yeah.
amazing. Pretty amazing. Now, when you talked about success being defined in the home as success in grades and not shaming the family, how has your definition of success evolved?
Hmm.
And was there a specific moment that you realized that achievement alone wasn't enough? What was that mental shift that you had?
Yeah, to me, that shift started 3 years ago when I became a full-time caregiver for my mom. So prior to that, right, I mean, yeah, I travel, I made pretty good money, I did all of that, but it was almost all of them were more of an external success definition. How much money do I make? Can I, do this, do that, whatever I want, right? And I was, fortunate to attain all of that. But when my mom, it was more 5 years ago, she had a minor stroke and she fell. So she just turned 80. Oh no, I'm sorry. She just turned 90. So at 85, she was my best traveling partner. My mom was my fun side, right? So before I got married, when I started working and made good money, she was my traveling companion, right? She was the
Oh,
best traveling companion. So I remember when I met my husband. Now I'll get to your answer or your question in a little bit, but before I met my husband, every place I travel, she was my default traveling partner because she was so fun and she's so flexible. She's up for anything. When she started traveling with me, she was in her 60s and she would wear flip flop. Doesn't matter what the weather was, right? Wherever we go, Thailand, China,
yeah,
Canada, she's wearing her flip flop. Doesn't matter if it's snowing outside, right? Because it's just what she's used to.
yeah.
She goes barefoot and flip flop. Everything else is too constricting for her. She does not like it. And yeah, so she would go everywhere and just up to for anything. And then at 85, we don't know if because she fell because she had a minor stroke or the minor stroke caused her to fall. But ever
Mhm.
since that fall 5 years ago, she slowly deteriorated. And unfortunately, her side of the family has dementia. She has one little brother left. All of her other siblings has passed away in their 60s, 70s with dementia. And
Mhm.
she just turned 90 and we still have her. But after that fall, I would go check on them. Out of the 10 of us, I'm the only one that I don't have kids, right? I'm the only one in our family to not have kids. And, there's reason, well, people tell me there's probably reason why I'm supposed to take care of my mom, because that's why I don't have kids. So if you believe in superstitious stuff, I'm like, okay,
Mhm.
whatever. I just don't want to have kids. So anyways, I would go check on them and I would, say, hey, Dad, I'll come over and stay. And he's like, no, 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 we're fine. So for 2 years, she was still able to walk. And then 3 years ago, she was heavily dependent upon us. So her physically and her mentally start declining. All right. So 3 years ago, I moved in. So I moved in and I was there from Sunday night through Thursday night. So that means it's impacting now my relationship with my husband because I'm practically a weekend wife, right? Because I'm there. So moved in with my parents, helped take care of my mom. And that's when 3 years ago is when things shift for me. What determines success is now no longer how much money I'm making, the external success criteria. It's more like, how do I now be there for my mom, be there for my dad, right? And then make sure I have enough time for my husband, but then also make time for myself. So now I'm looking at, three main factors that I got to assign priorities to. So it's no longer the external factors, but more of myself, my mom, or my husband, right? And that shift slowly now, I decided within those three options, I'm priority number one. Only because I determined that if I don't take care of myself, I cannot take care of my mom. And then so I actually had to, I don't want to assign priorities. Who should I prioritize? But fortunately, I do have a really understanding husband, right? So I talked to him. I said, right now, priority number one is me. I need to take care of myself. And then so that I can take care of my mom, because I don't know how long we'll have her. And then, honey, you're third on my priority list, right? And the reason why I understand is prior to taking care of my mom, I took care of his mom when she had cancer. So I moved in, took care of his mom for 8 months before she passed. And so that's why, he said, you go take care of your mom. It's time for you to take care of your mom. So that's where my shift went from the external stuff to the internal stuff, was where the self-care started happening. And then I started getting more and more into paddling, right? So that's
Yes.
where that shift happened there.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that. Kasey, you have a heart of gold. And I love that your next chapter is going to be centered around taking care of you, but also so that by taking care of you, like you said, you are helping others, you're lifting others. And that's the way you described your father. I feel like that's kind of how you're living as well. I think I see that connection for sure. Now, you just talked about one of the joys, one of the things that brings you joy. Not a lot of people know that you compete on a world level. Oh my goodness. Can we maybe just shift? I like to highlight that just because it is a part of who you are and you living fully. Can you just maybe give me and our listeners an understanding of how that journey began? Like what drew you to dragon boat, paddling? How did that story begin?
Back in 2015, so a little bit over a decade ago, Paulette Luangbise approached me and said, hey, Kasey, right? So over a decade ago, I was still on that external success criteria. I was still traveling, making good money. My mom and my dad are doing fine, right? It's all about Kasey, all of this. But in 2015, she approached me and said, hey, I need a paddler in the Lao Boat Racing Festival in San Diego here that we do annually. And at that time, I wasn't really involved in the Lao community as much. I was doing my own thing. I was hanging out with different set of people, enjoying life. And she basically, and I said, oh, yeah, sure, I'll paddle. I have no idea what that is. So that was in September of 2015-ish. So I came and joined Paulette Angel's team, right? So that was part of the team that I joined with the Lao Boat Festival. And I loved it. I've always been a very physical person. I'm always active, right? I like hiking and all of that stuff. So I was like, wow, and it's on the water and you're in San Diego. I loved it. I was hooked. So, actually, there was IMAX. So he was the one who got us into paddling too. So I want to give him kudos because he actually introduced me to San Diego Dragon Boat team. So I said, I want to do this. Is this only once a year? They're like, oh, no, there's a team that does it year round, San Diego Dragon Boat. Long story short, I joined. We practiced and we raced, year round. And that's how I got into dragon boating. But it was not really, it was more recreational, right? I would show up once a week on a Sunday and just practice. So it was never competitive to me. It was just kind of fun being there with the whole community. So that was ongoing until COVID hit. So when COVID hit, I was never competitive. I don't know where I stand with other paddlers. And when COVID hit, we couldn't do dragon boat practices because distance, social distancing, right? You can't have 20 people in the boat. And some of the team members went and got an OC1, so an outrigger canoe for one person that you paddle out. So, and again, I'm not going to spend, at that time, it was like 5,000. Now, I'm not going to spend 5,000 for something that COVID's not going to last long. We all thought it was going to go away soon. Well, it didn't. And so a lot of people, including Paulette, went got an OC1. There were people I know. So I'm like, oh, okay, fine. I'll just buy one. So I bought one. And then we would just train, just go pad out together. And then the first time I went out to the ocean in my OC1, because dragon boating is calm water, right? So you have to be in the bay. But with the outrigger canoe, you can go in the ocean. And once I got into the ocean, I was hooked. It was so much fun. And unfortunately, a lot of my San Diego Dragon Boat paddle with OC1 are afraid of the ocean. So they don't go out to the ocean. And so one of my coaches Karen Jewell said, hey, Kasey, why don't you go paddle with a bunch of ladies who all they do is paddle in the ocean? So that's the Hano Hano Outrigger Club.
Okay.
So that's the one with OC6, 6 people. But of course, because they can't do OC6 either, they're out there paddling the OC1, but all they do is out in the ocean. So anyways, I started practicing with these ladies. And then I remember just going out, and every time we would do, drills, I was constantly in the front. I'm like, are they not going hard? Are they just taking it easy? Then I realized I'm actually pretty fast in this thing. And so that's when I found out that, oh, I'm actually fast in paddling. And so then a bunch of us just start looking around. I didn't realize there's an equivalent of like an Olympic for dragon boat paddlers, right? And then by that time, when COVID was over, I start training. So long story short is that I was fast and good enough where I start competing internationally, right? And then to a point where I tried out for Team USA. First time I made it was in 2021, right? I made it Team USA, and it was supposed to be in Hong Kong. And COVID was still not quite done, so they canceled it. So that was when I first made my first Team USA. I was excited as heck, to be at that level. But then I kept training, and then 2023, I made the team again, and I represented USA, went to Thailand. So that was great, and it allowed me to, travel to Thailand and all of that. And then, so it's every 2 years, you have to, when the first time I made it, my family thought that I was in this Team USA forever. I said, that's not how this works. You have to try out. Because I could be drinking and eating ice cream, and so I got to constantly try it out. So I'm constantly training. So the last one, so I tried out for Team USA again. That was in Germany last year. So with the passion of paddling now, right, it's part of my self-care, but I think I'm done with Team USA. It's a lot of training. Now I want to approach it more paddling with something that I enjoy. Paddling just for fun, but maintain that slight competitive, but not too much. It was too stressful. And where I'm at now in my life is I want to continue doing that because it's so great for me spiritually, physically, socially, because it takes me to travel everywhere, right? And I get to meet great-minded people. So I'm all about now is paddling trips, right? So yeah, so of course with that, where I'm at now is paddling, travel, and self-care is where I'm at this point in my life, right? Everything just kind of fell into place. I mean, I'm still a caregiver for my mom, but we now have help. So that helped tremendously. So we're able to, it's just a good place for me. And I'm so fortunate to where I'm at now. That's where how paddling is part of my life. And it'll always be part of my life. It's maybe not as competitive as it used to be, but now it's more of a enjoyable maintenance sort of tool for me, my self-care package. Part of it. Yeah.
That's amazing. Well, 3-time World USA team, like to be on with the team and to win medals for 3 seasons or however we call it. That's pretty amazing. Just phenomenal. I just want to give you flowers because I joined the LCCC because of you and joined the Satsui Lao all-women paddling team because of you. And it was right after a couple of years after my divorce, and it was what I needed just to kind of regain a sense of belonging and community, and the women are just so positive. It's just so much fun. I loved it. And when I can, I will be out there paddling with that team. I know you coached us until you were too busy to But anyhow, I just want to say thank you for inviting me to join that team. And it's an amazing experience. And so just like your father, I just want you to know the impact that you've had on me with that.
Oh, thank you, Lily. Well, you're part of my pillars now. So it's, yes. So all my girlfriends, all my paddling girlfriends, it's you guys are my foundation. I'm thankful to have you in my life, Lily.
Same. I want to ask you about culture and the sense of belonging. And I just mentioned the Lao Community Culture Center. And, you've been volunteering for over a decade now. And was there part of you growing up where you were hiding your culture at all? Or were you always pretty open about it? Did you have a hard time fitting in growing up?
Fortunately, right, we grew up in San Diego mainly. There's a lot of refugees. So that helped tremendously where you could gravitate toward people who understand you. So that being said, there's always going to be, ignorant people out there, even if you're in that environment. But I do have such a great set of friends. Fitting in was that not big of a deal. But I think all of us as a group, we want to fit in. So, you want to eat the same food because I always remember like, oh, I can't take this food, especially on the plane, right? Because you can stink up the whole plane. So I think that was the fitting in was, I mentioned I want to wear shorts because it's freaking hot, right? So, and I did that because, I found a way to do that. But there's certain things, probably not just us as refugees fitting in, but I think kids and teenagers in general. You want to fit in by wearing the same clothes and all of that. But the one thing that was hard was our food, just because it's so pungent, right? That was probably the biggest thing that I don't want to say hide, but I just couldn't fit into our environment, just the way the food is prepared. But that's the thing that I appreciate once I enter college. Like at college age is where you're like, whoa, that's great stuff, right? And that's when, for me, now that I'm rediscovering, after Paulette got me into the boat racing, she signed me as her treasurer for the Lao Community Culture Center, which was supposed to only last for 2 years, but it's been a decade, right? So, but that's okay. We have a new team that we're transitioning into so that I can transition out. And I always tell her, I joined because every time I know you guys have a meeting, you're going to have a Lao food. So that is, right? So to me, where I'm at now, it's the Lao food that I'm rediscovering, and I'm trying to learn how to make it. I have to say, I am not the best cook, not to mention Lao food, because I remember when I mentioned that I would kind of go and be with my parents and cook for them. And I thought, oh, I don't have the time because I was still working, but I can make all, where you cut meats up and put things in. But I would use a crock pot.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Thinking that, it could all come together, the flavor.
Okay.
So I did that for about almost a month. I would cook them, I thought was decent, right? My sister Gail, I guess she was asking my dad, oh, she's been cooking for you. And my dad said, yeah. It turns out that they really didn't like my cooking. And my dad's like, yeah, we ate it when she's here, but we really don't like it. It didn't taste good. But they didn't want to hurt my feelings. So my sister told me that. And I'm like, okay, no more crock pot for a shortcut to Lao food. So right now for me is Lao food was something that I was always, it's just something you can't easily fit in, right? But it's where I'm at now. It's learning how to make Lao food. And I'm so grateful. I think I mentioned it to you where a couple of weeks ago, I went to a book signing where I was so excited to see that there's now an official Lao recipe by An Seng. He's actually going to host, when I went to his book signing from Lao Kitchen.
Yes.
He mentioned that he's going to run a Lao foodie tour this October. And after the book sign, I'm like, do you have room for one more? I would love to go. So he was able to accommodate me, and I'm so excited. That's now part of my self-care package is maybe not only having Lao food, because I've always had that when I go to the Lao community meetings, but something that I can maybe learn how to make myself and enjoy it more. So that is something I'm hoping to rediscover of something that I couldn't fit in when I was younger. Yeah.
Oh, I love that. Tell us a little bit more. I just want to give him flowers about the Lao Kitchen. I follow him on Facebook and I am looking forward to living vicariously through you. Tell us a little bit about that Lao foodie tour that you're going to be doing.
Yeah, so apparently he's been doing this. I think this is the 4th year. So my sister Gail was the one who told me that. She's like, "Hey, I'm gonna go to a book signing. You want to come?" I was like, "Oh, okay." So I went with her, and it's gonna be his 4th annual Lao foodie tour, and it's 10 days where he's gonna take us to different places all over Laos and just introduce us to the main staple of Lao food. Going to them, also cook it, right? Go to the market, meet different chefs, help prepare, go the markets, the morning markets, the night markets. So really just going to different areas of Laos and discovering where the root is, our padek, the pungent fish sauce, where it was made, how it's introduced. There's a website that actually includes the itinerary of what he'll take us through. Oh, wait, is there? Actually, I'll just tell them an overview because I think the itinerary comes once you sign up for the tour. So yeah, so I'm looking forward to that and just rediscovering. And my husband, his in-laws, they used to live in Tennessee, and I met some great people who are not, in Tennessee, who are not exposed to a lot of Asians, Yeah, not to mention Lao people, right? They always mention that, hey, if you ever go to Laos, we would love to go with you. And I'm never, I mean, if I go, it'll be to a touristy place, right? So I invited them, and Sang was able to accommodate the couple that I met over in Tennessee. So they'll be joining me. They'll be fun. Yes, it's just gonna be great. And then he just released his first book, the recipe. Beautiful, beautiful cookbook. Not just about the recipe, but I love the fact that he intertwined stories with all the dishes. Even if you don't want to, cook, just a book to just read about the story behind each one of the dishes, and it's just beautiful, beautiful. I think every Lao family should have this book in their house. It's just even for reading, but I'm actually going to attempt to cook some of those dishes. So, yeah.
Oh, I love that. I look forward to his next book signing because I would love to be able to meet him in person. I think we were at the same event, and I was just running around because I was volunteering and never got to introduce myself. But hopefully he'll make his rounds back in San Diego into one of our local events.
He will. So he'll be here for the Lao Food Festival in June. So he'll be there. Yes.
Okay. Okay. I love it. Thank you. Thank you for that. So we talked about what you want to reclaim in terms of culture. I want to just take a moment to thank you for bringing me into the LCCC. And it was something that I had always wanted to do as part of my journey in life, was to give back. It was the right time for me. I appreciate you inviting me to join the community in a more deeper and sort of intimate way, instead of just being a spectator and enjoying. I get to see, all the nuances and a lot of work that goes into all the events. And you've spent years of caring for others. I'm so inspired by your kindness and just how you give love. It's so unselfish, and it's taught me a lot. If you were to just give advice around family, community, give advice to future generations, what would that hope be as it relates to like community and family?
The advice will be different depending on the stage of your life, right? During our college age, it's a different advice. It's just to go out there, define what success means to you, whatever that means. It could be money, and that's okay. Do it, decide what it is. And I always say, be unapologetic. Just do it, and then you're okay. Things will happen, but it's going to happen the way, whatever that is, right? And then where I'm at now, in my second, I don't want to say final, it just sounds too dramatic, but where I'm at now at 55 is it's a different advice that I would give. This point for me is it's okay to say no. You no longer have to carry that burden by yourself. And that's why I've decided to transition out from volunteerism with the Lao community. I'll always be a part of it, no doubt. But I no longer need to carry the work myself. I can move it, pass it on to the next set of people who will have new ideas. So I would say the advice where you are now, where you've already established, your financial stability, family relationship, whether that happens to be, once you're in this part, it's okay to say no. It's okay for other people to carry organization forward without you, and focus on being more present, not just for yourself, but also for the family and your loved ones, and just live the way you want to live. It's okay. Just focus on that. So two different advice depending on where you're at.
Yeah, no, I thank you so much. To me, that is my definition of a worthy immigrant. And so if I were to ask you, what would be the definition of worth an immigrant? You put those two words together, the worthy immigrant. What comes to mind to you?
The worthy immigrant is, by definition itself, it's just basically, you satisfy the requirement of being an immigrant, right? So that could be, for us as refugees, we satisfy that requirement. We're worthy to be an immigrant. But once you're here in the country, how can you then contribute to this new home that you're in, right? For us, it's America. So not only are you worthy because of your political situation, that in itself gives you the opportunity to be here. But once you're here, how do you then give back to where you're at, and then to honor your community? So really, to be worthy is, by definition, we're already worthy. But once we're here, how can we be more worthy of where we're at now? And then how can we be worthy of honoring our Lao community. So that's where I think being involved in, where you at, Lili, with being on the board of the Lao Community Culture Center, LCCC, that makes you worthy in itself, right? And then how can you then give back to the country that has open arms to you, right? So that's another part of being worthy. And I think for you, with all your volunteers, not just in the Lao community, but in the local communities within here too, that makes you worthy. That's my definition, and I've done it, and I am part of where I feel like I've already have satisfied that worthy immigrant, to your point, and so I'm just fortunate. So now I'm just going to focus on what matters to me at this point. So.
I love that. I love that for you. I love this next chapter. This is where I feel like our lives kind of begin. Is now the focus is on us and how we could be better for ourselves and for our community. So thank you so much for sharing this space with me. I am truly, truly honored to have you on the podcast, and I look forward to spending more time with you and enjoying this new chapter with
Thank you, Lili. Thank you. Yes, we'll have fun for sure. Can't wait for you to join me here. Yes.
Yes. Keep the seat.
Yes.
Keep the seat warm for me.
Always. Starting today if you want.
Love it. Well, you have a beautiful, beautiful rest of your day. And if you were to look at today and based on what we talked about, right, on what the perfect day would look like for you.
Oh, I did say I need to start my day off with a very strong Vietnamese coffee. So that really super, super strong where it would just jolt you awake. So I actually make my own Vietnamese coffee. Just have that, before. That's actually my rule is I don't look at anything else, not turn on any electronic devices. Until I get my full cup of Vietnamese coffee in the morning, right? So once I do that, assuming that I no longer have to work, is I would just go out and paddle and just kind of enjoy, just being out in the water, either by myself or with paddling friends, right? And then obviously making sure, on my mom and then my husband. So it's still that theme is myself, my mom, my husband right now, but doing it in a more being present and really just letting it go. Just having those three things, I think it's my perfect day always. Yeah.
May you have a perfect day each and every day. Okay.
Thank you. Love you, Lili. Thank you. Thank you.
Kasey, thank you. Thank you for sharing your story, your wisdom, and your heart with us today. What I appreciate most about this conversation is that it reminds us that success is not a destination. It is not a title, a salary, a degree, or even a collection of accomplishments. Success is a life lived with intention, a life rooted in values, a life that honors where we came from while giving ourselves permission to become who we were meant to be. Your journey reflects the sacrifices so many immigrant families have made, but it also reflects something equally important: the courage to redefine success on your own terms, to choose presence over pressure, joy over proving, purpose over performance. You have shown us that being a worthy immigrant is not about carrying the weight of everyone's expectations forever. It is about honoring those who came before us while creating a life that feels whole, meaningful, and true. Thank you for being such a beautiful example. And to everyone listening, I hope today's conversation invites you to pause and ask yourself, how do I define success? What am I striving to prove? And what would change if I believed I was already worthy? As we close this chapter, we also begin preparing for the final episode of season 1. Next month, we explore the Gold Tree legacy. Throughout this season, we've talked about silence, belonging, identity, healing, visibility, worthiness, and becoming. But every lesson we've uncovered leads us to one final question: what story will I leave behind? Legacy is more than what we accomplished. It is the wisdom we pass on, the cycles we break, the lives we've touched, the roots we strengthen, and the branches to help grow. In our final episode, we'll reflect on the journey that brought us here, and explore how each of us can create a legacy grounded not in achievement alone, but in love, courage, service, and authenticity. Because, like the gold tree itself, our lives are connected. The roots run deep, the branches reach far, and the seeds we plant today may provide shade for generations we may never meet. Until next time, remember, you are worthy, you belong, and your story matters. Thank you for joining us on Rooted and Becoming. Until then, bye. Please follow and subscribe at Gold Tree Co. Stay rooted and becoming, and worthy beyond measure.